Well, so the gentleman that's joining us next is actually we've been buddies for 15 years now. We were in a startup together, and then got bought by Microsoft, and then he went over to GitHub, and then we bought GitHub, and now he's back in, and then that was all good. So then I then left Microsoft and joined Ed at GitHub. So anyway, I've kind of spoiled the surprise. So we've got Ed Thompson's coming up next for us. Edward Thompson. He's going to be talking to us about another acquisition that's been happening, actually. It's the JavaScript Coder's Guide to GitHub and NPM is what we're going to talk about. So he's going to take us through, the NPM team, them joining GitHub and what that means and kind of what the future is for NPM now that it's part of the GitHub family. So really excited to this session, really excited to talk to Ed afterwards. So we'll let's get started with this session. So over to you, Ed.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me here at GitHub Satellite, the virtual edition this year. I'd be lying if I said I don't want to, be meeting you face to face and talking to you directly about the projects that you're building and about the packages that you're publishing to NPM. Obviously, we can't do that this year. So I'm really happy that GitHub has been able to keep us healthy and safe together, and that you've decided to join us virtually this year. My name is Edward Thomson. I'm a product manager at GitHub, and I work on NPM. And if that doesn't entirely make sense, why is there a product manager at GitHub working on NPM? Well, it turns out that NPM has been acquired by GitHub. So we announced earlier this year in March that GitHub was going to acquire NPM Inc. And then a few weeks ago, we actually completed the acquisition in mid-April. So now NPM is a part of GitHub. And here at GitHub, we're extremely excited about this, in particular because NPM is such a great fit as part of GitHub. Just like GitHub stores the world's open source software, NPM packages it and delivers it. And that's not going to change. We're going to continue to invest in NPM and continue to improve it because the entire JavaScript ecosystem relies upon NPM. And in the year 2020, that's a huge portion of the development ecosystem because almost every single web app uses JavaScript on the front end. Many of them use JavaScript on the back end. And many desktop apps are even built in JavaScript, like VS Code and Slack, the things that we use on a day-to-day basis. And all of those applications rely on NPM. When I think of the NPM product, I think of it in two parts. First, there's the NPM CLI, and that's what most of us are used to interacting with on a day-to-day basis. After we've cloned our repositories down from GitHub, we run NPM install to actually install our dependencies. And like most of my projects are actually TypeScript. So I run npm run build to transpile that TypeScript into JavaScript. And then I run npm test to actually test my application. So I think that when many of us think about NPM, we think about the actual NPM CLI. But in fact, NPM is a lot more than just that. There's also the NPM registry. And that's where all those packages live that NPM fetches. And it turns out that not every developer actually uses NPM on the command line. You might use a different package manager like Yarn, and that's another great tool. But whatever you use, whether it's NPM or Yarn, you're actually still downloading those packages from the NPM registry. So to suggest that the NPM registry is important is an understatement. It's actually an absolutely critical piece of infrastructure. It turns out that it contains just about 1.25 million packages. Now, this is everything from the critical packages that make up modern software development, things like Lodash, Express, and React. And it also ends up being things like the silly applications that I write, that I build and publish, like a little library for doing complex arithmetic. all of these packages live in the NPM registry, and they're available every time you run npm install. Last week, there were over 20 million, I'm sorry, there were over 20 billion downloads of packages. So this is every time somebody downloads a project and runs npm install, or every time somebody does a CI build on GitHub Actions and runs npm CI. I think like one or two of these downloads might even be packages that I built. And as Nat mentioned in his keynote, last month there were over 84 billion downloads of packages. Now, we often call these things vanity metrics. And when you do that, I think that's okay, but you might minimize these numbers because each of these almost 85 billion downloads has to succeed. And if it doesn't, you can't do your development. Each of these downloads has to succeed or you can't do a deployment. And so it's absolutely crucial that the NPM registry is fast, stable, and available to you as a JavaScript developer. And so we're going to continue to invest in NPM to make sure that your downloads keep working. And so, yes, we're going to continue work on this critical, invisible infrastructure of software development. But we're not only going to work on the infrastructure. We're also going to work on new features and new functionality. And we're going to do that in both parts of NPM, both the CLI and in the registry. So since it's the thing that we interact with most, or at least most obviously, I want to talk about the NPM CLI first. So right now, the team is working on NPM v7, and that's the next version of the CLI, and it's actually a really big shift. The CLI team is doing some major refactoring. They're improving correctness and performance. They're helping secure your software better, and they're trying to improve compatibility with the other tools in the ecosystem. Now, I was actually able to get a sneak peek of what's coming in NPM v7. It turns out I just cloned the repo because the NPM CLI is open source. So they've shared that with me, and I'm actually able to take a look. So I'm able to show you as well. So one of the things that the NPM CLI team is improving is the experience around NPM audit. And I think this is incredibly important because NPM audit helps us secure our software better. And so here I have a really simple package, a really simple JavaScript project. It has one dependency. It turns out, though, that this dependency is a little bit old and now has some vulnerabilities. So if I run NPM audit using the current version of NPM v6, I can see exactly what it's doing. And it'll take just a second, and it finds, well, it tells me it's found 18 low severity vulnerabilities. There it is right there. And I think that's helpful, but there are actually some problems here. For example, there's a lot of noise. Like this tabular layout is really pretty, but it's also really space inefficient. It's taking up a lot of space just to tell me that there's a simple problem in one package, and that package is Minimist. Minimist is a really popular package, and so you actually see it a couple times in here because it turns out that the Minimist package is used by other packages. You can see it's used by makedirp. It's used up here again by makedirp. It's used down here by Optimist. And so the Minimist package having a vulnerability means that I get this repeated over and over again. And that's fine. It's really helpful that all this information is there, but it would be more ideal if this were a little bit more concise. If I could get the information about the security vulnerabilities and how to fix them as directly and quickly, as succinctly as possible. So that's one of the nice new changes in NPM v7. So if I run NPM audit using NPM 7, well, the output's a lot different. I don't have that tabular layout anymore, so it's not taking up as much space. And you see that actually, this is all it outputs. This time it knows that Minimist is the vulnerable package. And even though I have multiple things that I'm using that depend on it, like makedir-p and like Optimist, it doesn't have to repeat the information over and over again because it knows that if I just update Minimist, all of these problems go away. So I'm really excited about that change. I think that it's going to be a really big help in understanding the vulnerabilities in our software packages. And that lets us fix them easier and quicker. But while we're doing this with NPM audit, we're also making some really interesting changes around the way it actually understands vulnerabilities and how it can fix them. So here's a package, and if I look at my package.json, you can see that this is just a super simple project. It depends on a single package, makedir-p, and it depends on caret o.4.0. That's semantic versioning or semver, meaning that we want makedir-p o.4.0 or any newer minor version. We won't automatically update to major versions because those could have breaking changes. And in fact, makedir-p does have a breaking change in version 1. It moved from a callback-based approach in version 0 to using a promise, to returning promises in version 1. And although the promise API is definitely better, it's going to require refactoring your code where you call makedir-p. So it's not something that just running npm install is going to get you. Now, the problem is if there's a security vulnerability in this version of makedir-p, and there isn't a vulnerability in makedir-p itself, but in Minimist. If we look at our package lock.json, we can see that we're locked at makedir-p o.4.2, and we have Minimist that makedir-p depends on. And if we run npm 6 audit, what we see is that there is actually a vulnerability. There's a vulnerability in this version of Minimist, and the version of makedir-p that we're using is ultimately vulnerable. Now, npm 6 audit tells us that this vulnerability requires semver major dependency updates. It can't do this resolution automatically. It asks us to update to makedir-p 1. So we'd actually have to go and refactor our code. And that makes sense, but it's awfully frustrating. The new audit functionality in npm v7, if I run that, it actually tells me that it can address all issues just by running npm audit fix. And that's pretty surprising because npm 6 definitely can't do that. So what happens if I run npm 7 audit fix? Well, it tells me that it changed one package, and now, as a result, I have 0 vulnerabilities. So what did it do? Did it just ignore that major version update? Let's take a look at the package lock.json. No, it didn't. It didn't update us to the major version. It didn't break our semver. It downgraded us. So what it's actually done here is realized that in our package.json, we've asked for 0.4.0 or anything newer that is semantically versioned acceptable. And we were at o.4.2, and instead of being able to upgrade us to fix that security vulnerability, it can downgrade us. So npm audit has gotten a lot smarter and a lot more able to deal with fixing your vulnerabilities automatically. I'm really excited about that. One of the other things I'm really excited about is compatibility with other tools in the ecosystem like Yarn. Here, again, I've got a super simple project. This time I've got a package JSON, and now I've got a Yarn lock. That indicates that people are using Yarn in this project. And usually, if I were to come in as somebody new to the project and familiar with NPM and not Yarn, what I would do is run npm install in this project. And what happens is that actually NPM and Yarn don't coexist very well. So what's happened now is NPM has created a package lock.json, like you'd expect, and it's installed makedir-p version 1.0.4. Okay. The problem with that, though, is that Yarn is locked at 1.0.2. So at this point, NPM has told me that I should commit this package lock.json, push it up, and I will just break everybody because we've got two different teams, the team using NPM and the team using Yarn, using two different dependencies. That's very, very frustrating. I can run this little reset script to start over, and now I've gotten rid of the NPM package lock.json. And I want to show you what NPM 7 does in this environment. If I run NPM 7 install, well, I still get my package lock.json, except this time I'm pinned at makedir p1.0.2. Now, that's exactly what it should be. That's what our yarn lock is using. And so that's great. We can see that our yarn lock is also in good shape. Now, the other thing that can be problematic is when somebody tries to install a new package using NPM. And so if I do that with NPM 7, let's say I install the abbrev package, well, again, I end up with that in my package lock.json. You can see abbrev version 111. And, NPM and Yarn kind of compete with each other, so we sure wouldn't want to update the Yarn lock, would we? Well, in fact, we do want to update the Yarn lock. We want to make sure that these two tools interact as nicely as possible. So there once was a time when Yarn and NPM, the two command line interfaces, really walled off from each other. But with NPM 7, we're going to see big improvements in their compatibility. I'm really excited about that. Another place I'm excited is the workspace support that's coming in NPM v7. Workspaces are incredibly popular in large projects. Here you can see Create React App. And this is, in fact, the Create React App project. And if I look at their package.json, they have defined workspaces. And you can look in the packages directory to see that. And now when I run npm 7 install, it will actually take just a moment because there are, in fact, a lot of packages that I need to download and install to uncompress into the node modules directory as part of Create React App. It's a pretty big project. But once those packages do get downloaded and do get installed, I will actually be able to look inside my node modules folder, and you'll see exactly how workspaces really work. So once that's done, there we are. I can look inside node modules, and there are a bunch. But again, we want to look at the ones that align with our packages directory. And so let's look for React Dev Utils. Sorry, I want to grep for that. And now you can see that instead of just installing it as if it were a normal package, it's actually created a symlink. And so it's actually understood the workspace support and able to hydrate those the proper way. And so that's something I'm really excited about in NPM 7. Running scripts and other commands in a specific workspace is going to be coming soon. But this is just amazing progress, and I'm really excited about what the team's been doing. Cool. So that's what's coming up in the NPM CLI, and I'm super excited about that. But again, that's not the only piece of NPM. There's also the registry. And we got a lot of questions when we announced that GitHub was going to acquire NPM about what that meant for the public NPM registry. And I understand why people were curious, because GitHub actually already has a product that manages packages, and it does manage NPM packages as well as Docker, Maven, NuGet, and Ruby gems. And so I think some people were concerned that we might get rid of NPM and replace it with GitHub Packages, or that we might stop working on NPM support in GitHub Packages. But in fact, both products will continue to exist, and we'll continue to invest in both of them. And honestly, they both have very different use cases. First, the NPM registry. The NPM registry just must stay online forever. Those of you who remember LeftPad will remember that a single package being removed from NPM had devastating effects for the entire JavaScript ecosystem, for JavaScript developers everywhere. Now imagine every JavaScript package disappears. Imagine that every time you run npm install that it can't bring in your dependencies. That would just be an absolute unmitigated disaster. So NPM will remain online forever, and the package URLs that you work with today will continue to work. We want this to be the place where you publish packages for the world to consume. And we've been spending a lot of time lately talking to package authors, maintainers, and publishers about what it is that they want in NPM. So NPM will continue to exist, and GitHub Packages will also continue to exist. It's a different system entirely. GitHub Packages supports private packages that you can share just within your organization. And so this is really helpful when you're building an application privately. You can publish your dependencies to GitHub Packages and then use them in the build, test, and deployment processes. But it's also useful to have public packages in GitHub Packages as well. If you're an open source author, you can imagine publishing every build into GitHub Packages as part of your CI process. And that'll let you flight those changes before that you actually release them to the public. And then as part of your release process, you publish the released package up to NPM itself. And that's when you give it to actual end users. So for NPM, we're immediately going to be engaging with the community. The NPM CLI already has a great RFC process that guides its decision making and its new features. And meanwhile, we started talking a lot more to package authors, publishers, and maintainers about how we can improve NPM. I've spent a lot of time listening, and I hope to spend a lot more in the coming weeks and months. And while we do that, we're spending an incredible effort on the registry's infrastructure. Right now, it hosts over 1 million JavaScript packages that get almost 85 billion downloads a month. And we're updating the infrastructure to get it ready for the next million packages. And of course, while we do that, we're busy working on NPM v7, which I hope you can tell I'm super excited about. And I hope that you are too. Looking longer term, we're excited about how we can integrate NPM and GitHub. For example, 95% roughly of NPM packages start their life on github.com. That means that we can provide, now that GitHub and NPM are joined, we can provide stronger assurances about the packages that you're using. We can trace a bug to when it was opened as a GitHub issue, to when it was fixed in a GitHub pull request, to a build that packaged it in GitHub Actions, to it being published as an NPM package. And that allows us to really understand the security of a package and a change that goes into it end to end. Later this year, we're going to enable NPM's paid customers to move to GitHub Packages. Today, NPM has several paid plans for private package hosting, and we're going to set it up so that paying NPM customers can move over to GitHub Packages. This will let us focus each of the repositories on what it does best. It will let GitHub Packages be a great solution for hosting private packages, and let NPM continue to focus on being a great public registry for open source packages. So we're really excited about the future for both of these products, for GitHub Packages and for NPM. And like I said earlier, we're really interested in hearing about how you use these products. Like I said, I love to learn about the projects that you're building and the packages that you're publishing. So if you're interested in participating in the NPM CLI development process, check out the NPM RFCs. They're at github.com/npm/RFCs. And if you want to follow along, but you aren't quite ready to participate, check out the NPM blog. It's blog.npmjs.org. The architect of the NPM CLI, Isaac Schluter, will have some really great blog posts about what's coming in NPM v7 and the status of that. I'm really looking forward to reading those. And of course, you should feel free to reach out to me. I'm Thomson on GitHub and on Twitter. But right now, I'm going to go back and join Martin and Dana, and I'll be happy to answer your questions there. So thanks so much.
Wow, that's brilliant, Ed. Thanks very much. Really enjoyed that one. Live demos for a start. Yay, that's fantastic. Great to see. Well done. That was took a lot of guts. So especially with everything else going on today. So that's brilliant. What was really good to see was, just NPM working so well with the rest of the JavaScript community. You know, the integration with Yarn was amazing to see, and actually seeing it working live. So yeah, really excited about what Isaacs and the team are doing with NPM v7. That's fantastic. The scale as well. It's just insane. The scale of NPMs. I thought GitHub was big, and NPM's massive as well. It's insane. So anyway, but before we go into Q&A and things, and let hear Dana's feedback, just want to, Dana, you might notice from Dana, she does like tattoos. I don't know if you noticed that. And I was telling Dana early on, because Dana actually owns a vinyl record store, and I was telling her a little bit something. Did you want to make any confession about your tattoo that you got a few years ago?
So this is what happens when you know me too well, isn't it?
Come on.
Yeah, I during a brief midlife crisis, I may have ended up with a large tattoo on my leg that is a script wrapped around a dagger that says "Death Before Digital." There's also a cassette tape in the mix. There's no vinyl, so
you know what? It's okay, because you're my spirit brother, Ed. You're my spirit brother. We're digital nerds living in a digital world, but we're analog first in all ways. So you know what? I'll take it. I actually listened to Rush on cassette last night, because that's what a nerd I am. Yeah, double cassette to wind down. I was jamming some Rush.
Which album?
Oh, come on. I don't want to start the Rush war. They got like 40 freaking albums out. 2112.
All right.
Is there any other album? Is there any other album that you're going to listen to? On you. I'll play the guitar later to entertain you. Okay, enough of my silliness. NPM v7 is so lit. The audit functionality that you showed us, I'm going to tell you what, I think it's a game changer. For people with the attention span of a goldfish like myself, I love the crisp way that you can just go find the information that you need. It's going to be a huge time saver. But we got some questions coming in. Remember, right now you can go on to githubsatellite.com/discussions and ask Ed or Martin or myself. You want some more Tom Sawyer, I'll bring it. But to ask some questions about all the awesomeness that NPM is going to be bringing to GitHub. But we got one for you right now. Crewbot wants to know, is there any look to better support WebAssembly ecosystem, maybe WASM or specific tools? Are you working on any of that stuff?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm actually a big fan of WASM, or WASM, however you pronounce it. That's not been top of mind for me, but I will definitely take that to the team. I can imagine some ways that you could better package WASM, and especially go with that. So yeah, that's a great question, and I'll definitely follow up.
Cool. So yeah, there's been quite a few questions in the discussions, and remember, if you want to join in the questions and answers, just click on the discussions button, or if you go on over to githubsatellite.com/discussions, you can answer Q&A. But one of the biggest sort of threads I was seeing was around why GitHub acquired NPM. People asking about that, and probably Logan Volkers has got a good question here. Sort of their biggest question was, when can we log in and deploy packages to NPM by just using like GitHub credentials? Is there any plans there?
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I'd love to be able to do that. I think that having a single login that works for both GitHub and NPM is a great idea. And I especially think that it can help, really nail down some of the multi-factor authentication scenarios. Like I said, when I was talking about NPM audit, I'm a huge fan of security when it comes to all of these packages and all of these repositories that we've been entrusted with at GitHub and at NPM. And so I think that leveraging the GitHub login to do that is a great idea.
We agree. We think that GitHub is like GitHub and NPM, to me, are beer and burritos, or tacos and tequila, or all the other amazing combinations. Like, I can tell we're getting close to lunch, because that is where my brain is at. And I heard that Ed's hanging out there in London. So go on to GitHub at Twitter and tell Ed where he can get some good tacos and burritos, and maybe some tequila, buddy. I know you want some. We were just chatting about how you miss Austin. It's not going to be the same, but it'll be close. Martin, any clue there where Ed can get some some good tequila over in London, even though you're in Ireland.
Not during the lockdown. Not in Cambridge. Definitely not good tacos anyway, unless you make them yourself. Not in Cambridge, where Ed lives. So yeah. Anyway, that's about that. But we should probably mean. I don't know if we've got time for one more question. Maybe actually, yeah. While we're on the audit stuff, Bogdan Hervan was saying around they're not super familiar with the NPM ecosystem, but how does that audit tool you were talking about? How does that help him if the packages included directly reference other packages with vulnerabilities?
Right. So NPM audit actually works by looking at the entire dependency graph of your project. So if you depend on a project, a package like makedirp is just a really simple, useful utility that makes DIRs. But it depends on other things. And makedirp itself doesn't necessarily have a vulnerability, but the packages it depends on does. So NPM audit can actually take a look at that entire graph and just spider everything and look at all of the packages that you're using. It can compare that to a list of CVEs. A CVE is a common vulnerability and exposure. That's a really technical name for a security hole. And so it can actually understand exactly the packages that you're using that have those security holes, even if you're not depending on them directly. It can, walk that entire graph. And so it's very useful to understand precisely the problems that you might inherit in your code base, even though you didn't write them and you're not even depending on them directly. You're just pulling them in, through a second or third level.
Got it. That's fantastic. Thanks, Ed. So again, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for that great session. Ed will be joining us in the Q&A and the discussions for the next 30 minutes. So head on over there. And the NPM team will also be in there in the Q&A as well. So please go along and see what you want to talk about. But with that, Ed, we'll wrap up with you. So thank you very much for your time. And we'll speak to you later.
Cool. Thank you.